It is radiator time on the GX. So as you can see, got our new OEM radiator here. Beautiful, look at that. Now the problem with something this big is you're kind of limited by shipping. So you're kind of stuck by whatever you can get it for locally. So hopefully you have some kind of wholesale relationship with your dealer. Typically, I don't know what percent it is, but it's better than list price, and they'll deliver it for free for you usually, because this is going to be anywhere from $100 to like $200 to ship it from anywhere else that has a greater discount. So the shipping outweighs the cost of the discount. So we'll start by showing the Gates belt. Gates is the OEM manufacturer typically. So this belt is as good as OEM. It's the K060882. Actually, the radiator was leaking. I noticed a puddle a couple days ago, or last week or whatever. Inadvertently, I accidentally did like a neutral drop. Long story, but I was in neutral. I was trying to get to drive and go, and it went into drive, and then it kind of did a mini neutral drop. It jumped the original belt that I just replaced 2 years ago. It got stuck behind the tensioner, and then it broke. So I was stranded. I had to take an Uber home, come back at the trailer truck, and pick it up. But here it is now. I noticed the radiator leaking at that point, same time. So I'm like, oh great, it's a belt and now a radiator. But typically 130K, 120K, it's like clockwork as to when your radiator is going to start leaking on the GX. If not, let me know. Typically south or southwest or west climates are hotter. You might experience the cracking sooner. Typically what happens on the driver's side plastic, it starts to crack and then dribble down, and you'll have a puddle like right under the driver's fog light. So we'll look at that when we take it apart. You'll see the ISF is back there with the green towel. I was trying to do the belt change on that. It's a whole nother video. But then this broke, and then the LS broke, and then the ES broke, and then the 4-post lift broke. I've just been dealing with so many broke cars that I'm just starting to catch up. So we'll get started shortly. This thing is a godsend. It's like a Toyota clip pliers, if that makes sense. So these pesky little like weird clips that you can't really get out. This thing pulls it right out. It pops the center piece out, and then you can remove the trim like just like that. It's that easy. You're not using needle nose or pliers or flatheads and breaking these clips, because they're a couple bucks a piece from what I remember. So Amazon, you can grab that for like 10 bucks. But basically we're going to remove these clips on the front plastic panel, and we're almost there at that point. There's not too much more to do the belt, and then we'll see what else I have to do to take the radiator out. I've never done that before on this truck, so we'll see how difficult it is. You might notice my, not siren, but horn here. I have an electronic air horn on a lot of my cars because the regular horns just don't cut it. And if you want someone to get out of your way, I recommend getting an air horn like this. I'll demonstrate it here. So if you want someone to get out of your way, get an air horn. They will get out of your way, trust me. So let's get started. I'm going to pull this plastic piece out, and we'll keep moving on the video. Alright, the radiator came with a fantastic little parts box here, so you can stick all your little plugs and clips in there. I don't think we have to move this, so we'll leave that. Step one looks like probably drain the radiator, but my step one is going to be remove this reservoir, because we got to reuse that. New radiator did come with a brand new cap, so that's good, but not a new reservoir hose. Step one, step two, get this reservoir out. So the belt was jammed behind the crank pulley. It was really in there, so I had to cut it to pull it out of there. Just a stupid move on my part, like just so impatient and dumb. I mean, this would have had this not went behind the crank pulley or in between the pulley and the timing cover, this would have worked to get me home, I'm assuming. I mean, it's got 3 ribs still. If it just jumped the other way, would have had better time. So I'm going to put the new belt on first because it's going to hold the fan belt in place so I can take it off of the water pump. Because I believe the fan and the, can't see much, I believe the fan, engine fan here, and the shroud can then come off as one unit, just straight up. Because right now the fan is inside the shroud and you can't take the shroud out with the fan. So it's got to all, I believe, come out in one piece. So I'm going to put the belt on. We'll do that next, but it's pretty easy. There's a routing guide on your hood. It tells you how to put the belt on. But the thing is, the hard part is sometimes figuring out what to tension, what to push on to get the leverage to move the tensioner so you can get the belt around it. So I'll try to reposition the camera down further and then show you what you can do to access that bolt. But you should be able to get the bolt without removing anything else. So we'll get in there. So as you can see, I was able to feed the belt around the AC pulley, and then it goes on top of the fan clutch there, and then the top portion you can follow up, and it goes over this idler pulley right there, and then it continues and it goes over the power steering pump, and then it goes down. Here's where it gets tricky because under the power steering pump there's another idler pulley way at the bottom there, you can see it. So it's got to go underneath that. Once it goes underneath that, it has to come back up and go around the tensioner, which you can see under that, under this bolt, the water pump, or the thermostat housing outlet. So it's got to come above that, and at the same time you have to turn that bolt with a wrench to basically pull the tensioner, and over the tensioner then you see it goes down around the crank pulley again. So once you get the belt on, you want to be left with that bottom idler pulley and then the tensioner. So we're going to put the belt, this lighting down here is just horrid. What we need to do is somehow make sure the belt doesn't fly off everywhere, which is kind of the tricky part. Just, okay, it just fell off. So we got to go around this bottom idler pulley, and after this point you can shove your hand in between the alternator, oh it's the alternator, sorry, not the idler pulley, between this hose, radiator hose. We're going to need to lift this belt up and get it under the crank pulley at the same time, and then torque the tensioner and then slide this belt over the tensioner, if that makes any sense. So I think that's a 12 millimeter. I'll grab what I think I need. I think you need a 1/2 inch 12 and then a 1/2 inch ratchet, and it'll fit on there, and somehow you can reach in and then torque it, turn it, but we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm going to do my best to record this and describe exactly what has to take place here. So if you see my fingers, let me sneak this up a little bit higher. Okay, there we go. Let's see here. So you'll see the end of a 1/2 inch ratchet. Correction, it's actually a 14 millimeter. So in a 14 millimeter, you need the ratchet to be lefty-loosey, because the tensioner is reverse. If you see my fingers down here, I think you can kind of see them. I have the belt, the back side of the belt is on top of the 14 millimeter socket. That's important. We got to do 3 things here. We have to pull the ratchet counterclockwise, we have to put the, hold on, we have to put the belt around the power steering pump. We have to put the belt around the alternator on the bottom, and that we can kind of do without any effort. So we'll sneak those around. The belt is not currently around the crankshaft, which is a problem. So I might have to finagle that. Let's see here. Yeah. Alright, let me get that under the crank, over the fan pulley. Yeah, we're too tight here, so you have to take the belt off the alternator, and then it's going to fall off the power steering pump, of course. And then you're going to have enough slack to then get the belt around the crank pulley. This is all doable somehow without removing anything else, because this is how I did it last time. FYI. If you have big arms or big hands, forget about it. I don't know what you're going to do. You have to take the under tray off and then kind of work from below and above. So this is kind of boring, but the belt is fighting me every which way. It got itself back on the power steering pump and back on the alternator, and then it fell off the fan belt, fell off the idler, and I'm just seconds from like throwing a ratchet across the room. That's okay. Of course the belt is all bent because it's been stored in a cardboard box the whole life. Alright. So I've got the belt around the crank, around the AC compressor, around the fan belt, around the idler pulley on top, around the ratchet, and now I'm going to put it around the power steering pump, right there, okay, around the idler pulley, the alternator, dang it, it looks like idler pulley. And now the final piece is the belt. This is important. Let me get this shot moved. The final piece is the belt around the, right there you can see it. The belt is around on the top side of, why can't the lights just function? The belt is on the top side of the socket. That it's around everything right now, all the pulleys except for that. So now what we have to do is we're going to pull counterclockwise on the ratchet, at the same time maintain tension on the belt, and then once the pulley, the tensioner pulley is loose or untensioned, we're going to slip the belt around the tensioner pulley, and then we're done. Alright, we're going to try to do this. So you see the belt right here by my middle finger. It's above the socket, and let's see how this works. So here's, push this all the way counterclockwise, much as you can. You have to go like farther than you think you can, and you'll actually feel the thing bottom out. It'll hit a wall at the maximum possible level. Hear that? It's basically hitting the water outlet pipe. But once it does, that's enough. It'll go on. And then you just wiggle this little socket off of there, and voila! That is how you change your serpentine belt without removing anything. I gotta move it one rib on this idler pulley that way, but we can do that easily. All we gotta do is do the same thing. Counterclockwise tensioner, and then push it on the rib. That's it. So after done with this, we're going to get this fan off. There's a couple 12mm nuts you can see. But now that the serpentine belt is on, this will be easier. These nuts will be a lot easier to pop loose. So give me a second, reposition the camera, and we'll get back at it. Okay, the fan is loose. I had to use the tactic of using two 12mm wrenches. You basically put one on, still can't see. Put one on one nut and then one on the other, and then you can loosen one and then tighten it gently, and then you can gently loosen the other one and then spin it, keep doing it, but eventually you'll be able to loosen all four, even though it doesn't sound like that makes sense. So I'm going to spin the nuts off, and then I think I got to remove the under tray to get some bolts down there, like the bottom shroud bolts. So I'll do that next. Okay, real quick, you can see the fan assembly is now off of the water pump, and it's kind of nestled inside of the fan shroud. So once we loosen the fan shroud bolts, this whole thing will just pull straight up. That's my plan, at least. So we got the shroud out as expected. It only had 2 bolts, so one on top, on the, which side is top? Top and right here. And then Toyota, in their infinite genius wisdom, there are no bolts in the bottom, there's just little tabs. So the tabs lock into the radiator. I don't know if they go right here, but similarly to this, yeah, they do. There's one there and there's one here. So the shroud just locks into the radiator on the bottom. That way you don't have to mess around with the bolts way down there. So all that has to be done now is disconnect the upper radiator hose, the lower, and the 2 transmission lines. And then there's 4 bolts. There's 1 bolt here, 1 bolt here, and then it looks like there is, let me get a light. I'm blind. It looks like there's a bolt on the bottom, but I can't see where it is. Oh, it might be in this little... Oh, look at that. Look at that. So you get an extension through the fog light hole, or the vent here, and that's your lower radiator hose, or your lower radiator mounting bolt. Same on the other side, I'm assuming. I don't think we have to remove the under tray. This is pretty crazy. I do need to drain the coolant somehow. I gotta salvage some of this because it's relatively new coolant. I think what I'm going to do is find a hose, stick it on the bottom of the drain, and then there's also a nice little rubber cap. You see a little rubber drain hole? I'm going to drop the hose right through that hole into a bucket, catch everything that leaks out. You can see some of the leaking here, the pink coolant on the radiator, all over the side of the drain. And typically what they start to do is leak somewhere up here. They start to crack right where this hose kind of meets the radiator. So somewhere in here it cracks, and then it just kind of drips very slowly. Just little tiny drips, drip, drip, drip. And it'll never leave you stranded. I mean, you'll always be able to get somewhere, hopefully. Looks like probably right, I can see pink kind of collecting right under here. That might be the source, although there is pink all the way up here. But I don't know if it's migrating up somehow or where it's coming from. Could be on the cap too, or could be on like the cap neck or something. Either way, whatever. I'm going to drain the coolant, take off the hoses, undo the bolts. You saw the bolts. And then clamp these lines, AT lines. Pull them off. This one's already loose a little bit. And pull the radiator. Put the new one in and we're done. Alright, radiator's out. Top hose is just right here, kind of pushed back out of the way. The AT trans cooler hoses are clamped off and just kind of setting down there. I'd recommend, it's probably easier if you take the lines off the bottom, hard lines. But to do that, you're going to have to remove the bottom skid plate and then just leave the lines attached to the radiator. The hose clamps, the clamps that were on there, They were in the worst possible position, like spun the wrong way, and I had to twist them to get them the right side up and all that stuff. So definitely, because these you can see the clamps are on the bottom, so you just use a pliers or whatever and pull them off down there. And then the lower radiator hose, leave that on the radiator and then just swap it over and drop the whole thing in like that, because you can't get this, it's hard to get this clamp inside the truck. Lastly, don't forget to move over your little bushings. There's 4 of them. This washer side with the nut, they just fell off of mine, or broke or fell off. The glue just kind of popped down. So I just used old black FIPG, stuck them on there and it'll harden, but it's on there enough that the bolts will go through them. But new radiator, a lot better obviously than the old. Installation is opposite of removal, but I will walk through the steps as I have before, here and there, just in case I missed anything. Okay, we're in, everything's good, it's bolted in, nice and tight, almost. Gotta do the top ones yet. Okay, so these AT cooler hoses, see how the clamp is up now? It's a lot easier to loosen this. Before it was like to the left or down. So keep that in mind if you want to access these clamps. Make sure to spin them so they're at the 12 o'clock position. Same with the one on the bottom. But we're looking good here. Everything is nice. Gonna tighten these 2 top mounting bolts up. Right here, this one on the other side. And then drop the fan in, the shroud, and then bolt in the fan, fill it up, and we're done. Okay, a little bit more progress. Shroud is in, fan is in. Tip here, when you're tightening your mounts, this side's actually a 13 millimeter. So you can put a 13 millimeter on the back side and then tighten the 10 millimeter bolt on the front. That way you can get your mounting rubber nice and tight. When you install the fan, since there's a belt on, hold on, let me fix this light again. Since there's a belt on, there's tension pulling on the water pump pulley or that fan pulley. So if you put just the 2 top nuts in, they're gonna not be able to tighten the fan down. So you have to kind of alternate kitty corner or opposite corners to tighten the pulley with the belt under tension. And then once you get those opposite side nuts tightened, you can kind of do the middle nut and then finally the other one on the other side. So the top one, essentially for the video, let's say where my finger is, the left, and then do the right, and then kind of go back and forth so it tightens it flush. Otherwise you're bending it and you could snap either the stud or the nut or strip it or whatever, and that would be really bad. So I'm going to finish tightening that, and then we got the reservoir, coolant reservoir here, a couple 10 millimeter bolts, put that back in. You can see my new power steering reservoir I did in a prior video that eliminated the power steering whine and the groaning. And then a new radiator cap will get it filled up, and idle and bubbles and all that stuff. Alright, so this is usually the time where everyone either just leaves the covers off and quits because it's too much and they're done, they want to start the car, bleed it, whatever. Or this is the time when you relax, do the final little touches, and you put the little covers back on. So we'll do that. One tip, this is just, I mean, this is basically same or similar to this SLCC SLLC super long life coolant, the pink stuff Toyota has. It says right on here Lexus, Toyota. I don't know if it's any different, I don't know if it's the same, but it's easier sometimes to get than the Toyota stuff, depending. If I have it laying around, I'll just use it. So I filled up the radiator with the coolant that drained out of it. There's obviously air gaps, air pockets somewhere here in the system. Generally on older cars like this, any cars that I have, they'll bleed themselves. So fill the expansion. I gotta stop doing that. I've been doing that in a lot of videos. the expansion tank here. Go ahead and fill that up to whatever, the low mark, the high mark, in between both marks, and go through a heat cycle, drive the car around, let it cool off, and the next day come back and you'll see this would have went down. So it'll draw coolant out of here to refill the system because of the air gaps that it's going to purge. It'll purge itself. It'll figure it out. It'll purge it out of the radiator cap and then kind of bubble it back to here, and then when it cools it'll suck the coolant back and no air. It's designed that way. It's really cool how they did that. I don't know how it does it. I guess it's just fluid dynamics or whatever, however it works. So enough on that. Let's put this back in while we have some final thoughts here. So the GX470 is probably one of the most reliable, if not the best, Lexus or Toyota platform. It's the Land Cruiser Prado. It's basically the non-premium Land Cruiser in other areas of the world. That means it's extremely dependable. This should have I think a 4-cylinder diesel, but that wouldn't fly in America, so they stuck in the V8. It's still set up to be very serviceable if you're out in the jungle, in the desert. I mean, honestly, that's what it's made for. And all this stuff, the whole radiator was so easy to get out, and the fan, everything, because it's designed that way. It's designed that if you have a failure, you can get back on the road with minimal tools, and that's exactly what we did. The 80 series Land Cruisers, which were the generation, call it 93 to 97 in the US, typically. The 91, 92s were a different, same thing, but a little bit different. But those had like dual alternator belts, so they had 2 serpentine belts or accessory belts. And one time, that saved me, because one time we were on a road trip to pick up a car, and one of those belts failed, but the other one stayed on. That got us home. So those are my thoughts. That's pretty much it. Nothing more to see here. Radiator's done. I'm going to put all these clips back in and call it a day. So thanks for watching, and see ya.